Hey everyone, welcome to Stewardship Leader, where we equip and encourage church leaders who are discipling people in the area of finances to be faithful and good stewards of that calling and to equip the church and the saints for the work of ministry. We're so excited that you're joining us today. My name is Leo Seda. I'm the host and the president of CSN, and it's such a pleasure today to talk about a topic that I think most churches don't focus on, especially leaders. So I have with me again Matt Bell, and one of the areas that he's very passionate about is investing, which is something that we need to do more of when it comes to educating the bride of Christ in the area of education in investing. And so today we're going to dive into a topic that I think it's something that's so important as we try to, especially as we get older, we try so much to grasp the younger generation and bring them into this topic of stewardship and help them understand stewardship and generosity. My desire and Matt's desire is that we would just focus more on helping younger people understand these biblical principles of investing, of stewardship. And one of those areas as investing is we found that Gen Z is very passionate about investing. And that's a good thing in many ways, but it also could be a bad thing if their influence and what they're receiving isn't a balanced message. And that's what we want to do today. I've invited Matt to come and talk about investing and why Gen Z are so gung ho about investing and how we can help guide them. Which is, again, it's a good thing that they're interested in it, but let's find ways that they're learning and find what we can do to help them. So, Matt, welcome to Stewardship Leader. I'm so excited you're back with us today.
Thanks so much, Leo. I love this topic. I've been looking forward to the conversation.
So there are some things that I want to kind of share to set us up. These are some things that you shared with me that I want to kind of get us started. You've done some research, and some of those are what I'm going to state now. One of them is that Charles Schwab found that 15% of all current stock market investors started in 2020, which is pretty remarkable. I don't think we've ever seen that before, to have such a huge increase of investors at one time. So we want to talk about why did that happen, especially because it was a time when the market actually dropped like 34% in like 10 days. And usually when that happens, people like run out of the market. And we saw a huge increase in investors at that time. Gen Z also are investing earlier than any other generation in history. They're starting around the age of 19. And platforms like Robinhood, Reddit trading communities, we've seen some action with that with some companies that they've influenced the way the stock has gone. And really just influences that are driving the advice that they're receiving from social media, from YouTube, from all kinds of platforms. And they're kind of changing their expectations or guiding their expectations in ways that it's probably not as healthy as it can be. So now that the lines between investing also in gambling has come in, some of these websites, I know Robinhood, Kalshi is two of the websites that just kind of gamify and bring gambling as a way of investing, which is kind of crazy. I never thought that gambling would be seen as a way of investing, but they're normalizing it. And it seems to younger people that that's a good way to increase wealth. And the whole idea really is this get rich quick mentality that the scripture is so against and so speaks about it in a way that helps us to see there's a huge danger with that, right? Steady plotting brings prosperity, hasty speculation brings poverty. And that's what we teach and that's what we believe, that's what we know from experience can happen. But we know it's a problem. Even Warren Buffett recently observed that he's seeing more casino-like behavior in the investing world than ever before. So that's definitely a problematic thing to address. So let's start with looking at the shifting landscape, what's happening with young investors. Why are they interested in investing more than others? And give us kind of a bird's eye view of what's happening with Gen Z investors and why so many are entering, and especially in 2020, why they entered in a market so aggressively.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. I mean, some of the things you just rattled off, there's really been an incredible change in the investing landscape in just the recent past. Some other figures to kind of support some of the things you said. In 2020 alone, there were some 10 million new investment accounts opened. That's remarkable. Between 2020 and 2023, some 30 million new investment accounts were opened. So there's been a huge growth in interest in investing and a huge growth in people actually starting to invest. There are a number of reasons for this. We can kind of unpack this as we go, but one of the reasons can be attributed to the so-called democratization of investing. There's a trading platform, Robinhood, that's become really kind of the poster company for this. In fact, that's how they position their mission is to democratize investing. And they've done it in a number of ways, one of which is to introduce commission-free trading. So they were the first to do that. Some of the old stalwarts in the industry, Fidelity, Vanguard, others started to follow their lead eventually, but they were the ones that really championed that and made that possible. They also championed the use of fractional share trading, where you can invest a small amount of money to purchase a fractional share of a stock or a mutual fund or an exchange-traded fund. They've also designed a really attractive, really modern, really kind of fun to use trading app. They've kind of gamified trading in doing that. But if you look at their competition, you look at some of the, like I said, stalwarts in the investing space, their apps, I mean, they've got apps nowadays, but they're a lot stodgier, a lot more kind of straightforward, a lot kind of more conservative in their design than Robinhood's app. So it's no wonder that Robinhood has really succeeded in attracting both millennials and Gen Z investors to their platform.
Yeah, there's definitely a different look and feel to Robinhood than there is to some of the larger, older institutions like Fidelity and so many others. That, and again, the ability to invest in both of them is the same, but the experience is different, and I think that's intentional, and I think that's part of the reason why Gen Z, especially, and some younger Gen Y, I guess, jumped on and feel like, okay, this I can do this. One of the things that we've had a chance to do, myself and David Thompson, who I worked with, the Stewardship pastor, for many years, is to teach a little bit on and like just the basics of investing. Nothing too complicated, just helping people understand the terms. And part of that 3-4 week class that we did was to actually walk people through the process of how to actually look at a mutual fund, how to decide, what are the parameters I'm looking for? How long has it been in existence? What kind of return does it have? And that's just basic stuff. And I remember one of the websites that we used was just to jump on and just to give them the the explanation was Fidelity. And as we went through it, it was just a way for us to help them. But it's a little bit, well, let me just, it's kind of bland. There's nothing fun about it. And I think that appeals to an older person because they're not looking for fun. They're looking for, like, I just want the information. Whereas younger people are different in that way. So I think Robinhood and some of the others that have come along, but especially Robinhood, has had that success because of the way they've structured it. And that may be a good thing. I'm glad that they drew people to it. The concern that I think both of us have, that church should have, is that in drawing them in, not only has Robinhood been able to provide a way of looking at investing that's not holistic, right? It's just fun. It's a quick, click away. You can do it right now. There's not a lot of process of education, like how do you do this? How do you understand this investment before you pull the trigger? And then the other part of it is all of these influential sports personalities, live stream people, financial experts, YouTube financial experts that have no qualifications come out and they're good at what they do and they draw sometimes millions. And unfortunately, that advice isn't holistic either. They have their own perspective, their own bend. Talk about that. What's the danger in that when someone that's a Gen Z, a 19 to 25, 30-year-old that's really thinking about investing and not having that long-term perspective? Talk about the danger of both the social media personalities, but also of like a Robinhood. Not that it's a bad platform, but there are some things about it that young people should understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Gen Z especially, and also millennials tend to look to social media much more than older investors do for investment advice and other financial advice. And some of it, look, could be fine, but you've got to be a little bit careful and a little bit discerning about it. One of the reasons why so many people were attracted to investing, especially young people during the pandemic, the pandemic was a very counterintuitive time. As you mentioned, the market fell 34% in 10 trading days. It had never fallen that far that fast. And historically, people leave investing when that happens. But in this
Yeah.
case, millions were attracted to it. And part of it was because of social media influencers. So Dave Portnoy, founder of Barstool Sports, professional sports was all but shut down during that time. he turned his attention to live streaming his day trading, and it attracted a lot of people, millions of people. There's a Reddit subreddit called Wall Street Bets. I mean, that name kind of says a lot. But a guy named Keith Gill, who went by the name Roaring Kitty online, he attracted millions of followers as well as he was doing two things. He was trying to run up the price of certain beaten down stocks like AMC Theaters and GameStop, and for two purposes. One was to try to help young people make a lot of money quickly. So you get a lot of people investing in a stock, it's going to raise the price. And so if you time it right, you could potentially make a lot of money. He also seemed to be kind of against the big players, the hedge funds out there. And so he knew that some of these funds were taking short positions. They were basically betting against these sorts of stocks, and he wanted to bring harm to them. And to a great degree, he did succeed in his missions to help young people make a lot of money. I mean, some people lost a lot of money too, and he did wreak some havoc with some of the hedge funds. And so all this publicity around these things, it drew more and more younger investors with the sense, I think the danger, to the point of your question, the danger here is the sense that there's easy, quick money to be had in investing, which is really counter to so much of biblical teaching, and really counter to some of the timeless truths just in investing in general.
Yeah, that's good. The other, I think, part of it, as Robinhood especially has done, I think they've gotten better at it, but early on, I remember this was a real big issue where they just almost gamified investing. And that, yeah, that draws people in because again, it's fun, it's easy, it gives you somewhat of a fun feedback. Hey, you've invested and there's hope here that you're going to make a lot of money, and all of that kind of plays into it. So talk about the gamification risk. How does that play into someone that it doesn't have the experience of having been in the market for a long time, seeing the ups and downs, understanding their own emotional, triggers and what makes them really a good investor. And I think we talked about this last time we spoke about having a process for investing rather than just having it be an emotional thing. So talk about that gamification, why a process is better, and how we might help not just the leaders that are listening to the podcast, but even those that we're teaching why that's a danger and how to balance that out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all leading to a very sort of short-term way of thinking that I see running through the culture. We've talked in stewardship ministries for a long time about the so-called pull of the culture, right? And so the concern has been historically, oh, people are going to spend too much time shopping. They're taking their identity from their stuff, the things they can buy. But today, the pull of the culture is very different. Today, it's about this desire to get rich quick, in the sense that you could get rich quick through investing. And something that's kind of fed into this whole cultural change that we're seeing is a 2018 Supreme Court decision that allowed states to legalize sports gambling. And they have 39 states today, plus Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico have legalized gambling, sports gambling. And so now it's normal to watch TV and see the commentators, hear the commentators talking about the odds of success of this team versus that team. And of course, that's too slow. You can't just bet on the outcome of the game. Now there's betting within the game on
Yeah.
specific plays. So everything is just speeding up. Everything seems to be about getting rich quickly. And that culture is really making its way through our culture and impacting especially our younger folks. And I think you mentioned also there are new platforms out there as well. Kalshi is one where you can wager on all sorts of things, from political races to the weather. So there are a lot of things happening in our culture that we in stewardship ministry really need to be aware of, because that's happening in our churches, to the people in our churches as well.
Yeah, I think that's where I think you and I both feel that passion to say, hey, this is happening. You may not be on Robinhood. You may not be on social media seeing these things. Maybe you don't, that's not what you click on that's constantly feeding you. I'm one of those people that I am interested in investing. I'm interested in finance. So those are the kind of things that come across my YouTube channel or my YouTube feed, so to speak, or any other platform that I'm on, because those are the things that I am trying to learn. But I'm in my 50s and I've been down this road a little bit. So when I listen to people, I don't automatically say, oh, that sounds awesome, let me do that. Like, no, I know better. And I understand the strategy isn't a quick buck, because there's no such thing as you can't beat the market. Yeah, there's so many things that I've learned over the years that help me to filter that information. However, for a young person, especially someone that is introduced to both the gambling side and the investment side as if it's one and the same. And all of a sudden you're like, this is a way that I can overcome, not having enough, or buying that house, or buying that, whatever it is that they're searching for. And I believe there's a kind of a financial burden or strain on younger people, because houses are more expensive, college debt is higher than ever before. So I think in some ways they're thinking the only way I'm going to break the mold, the only way I'm going to overcome is to do this. But then they're coming to it, unfortunately, with information that isn't holistic and it's very one sided. So, how do we as stewardship leaders help those in our congregation, especially those leaders who are kind of tasked with, hey, this is one of those things you should be teaching on, right? You're teaching people how to budget, teaching people how to get out of debt. You got to teach them how to invest as well. And that's what's going to draw young people in. How do we do that? What is the platform? What is the perspective we need to touch on, and how do we approach that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of answers to that. Perhaps not easy answers, but a couple of at least thoughts I'll share on that topic of how do we reach people with this message. I mean, for one thing, it's about teaching about investing. I think, historically, stewardship ministries in some places have been hesitant to teach on this topic out of fear that they're crossing some SEC line. And certainly we don't want to give specific investment advice to steer people to a specific stock or mutual fund or that sort of thing. But there's a lot we can teach about investing that brings God's principles to bear on this topic. I think, I'm kind of an idealist. So I do see a lot of hope in this. I see such opportunity in the millions of new investment accounts that have been opened and the young people that have been drawn to investing. But I take encouragement as well from certain movements outside the church. So, for example, you see there was a movement a long time ago that's still going on called slow food. It was to contrast against the fast food movement. And so this slow food movement encouraged people to make food more of a communal relationship-based experience where you're coming together to make meals slowly, intentionally, and fostering relationship. There's a more recent movement towards slow fashion that it's designed to counter the fast fashion movement. It's to educate people about the harms of the fast fashion movement, both in terms of the workers who are creating these very inexpensive items of clothing and also on the environment, and encouraging people to buy maybe fewer, higher quality items of clothing and keep them longer. So it's the slow fashion movement. I would like to propose a slow money movement. And so this might be so counter trend, counter cultural that it might just attract some attention from people. But if you offered a workshop or started talking about slow money, you mentioned Proverbs 21:5, which in the Living Bible translation says that steady plotting brings prosperity, hasty speculation brings poverty. Ecclesiastes talks about the race is not to the swift. I've seen this in the church as well, where like when my wife and I started dating, we've been married 26 years, but when we started dating, there was a movement in the church toward courting. That's a very old fashioned notion that's, not trendy, not cool. And yet it was taking hold in churches. And we did that. We got to know each other slowly. We did things in groups. My bent would be to go out to dinner one-on-one, have kind of intense conversations. But this courting movement that was taking hold in the church encouraged people to take a slower approach. And like I said, we've been married for 26 years, so I guess that says something about that approach. I see that also in the 2010s. There was a book called Do Hard Things. Who wants that, right? And yet it sold millions. It was encouraging young people to choose uncomfortable things, to choose more difficult pathways because they were better. They were better for character formation, better in so many ways. And it was very, very successful. And so I think as stewardship leaders, it behooves us to take this more idealistic approach to say, hey, let's bring scripture to people. We don't need to be trendy or try to be something that we're not, to try to be cool or something like that. We just need to teach God's word, but bring it to these younger people in a way that might be intriguing, like call it slow money.
Yeah, it's definitely not sexy or attractive. And I think this is why Gen Z and younger people are so drawn to this kind of investing and potentially even gambling, is because that's just a pace of information today, right? Everything is quick. I remember, I mean, we're both old enough to know, well, I think both of us have been around before the internet really kicked in. And so we've seen such a speed an increase in speed as to how the information is coming. And now, even in education, I know this is something as stewardship leaders we struggle with. How do we get people to commit to something that may take multiple weeks to teach, like how to get somebody out of debt, how to help them create a budget? I can't do that in 15 minutes. I just can't do it. There's just so much that needs to bake into that kind of education and the steady process of learning and applying and understanding and making mistakes and keep trying. And I think that's part of the problem is that we are so used to just give me, TikTok. It's such it kind of bends our thinking of I want something quick, valuable, don't waste my time. Investing cannot be seen the same way, but yet that's what is feeding this gambling mindset and also the quick money perspective that somehow if I can get information that quickly, if I can do all of that, why can't I do this the same way? And that's the danger. So let's talk about kind of a reality check. I think sometimes to teach someone the right thing, you have to warn them and show them examples of where things could be. I think that's the benefit of age and experience is that you've probably suffered some and you can share that and say, you think this won't happen to you, but it probably will. I remember when I was going through school to get my A&P aircraft and power plant licenses to work as an aircraft mechanic, one of the things that was said to me that I did not like, you will be laid off in your career as an aircraft mechanic 2 to 3 times in your lifetime. And I remember like, nah, that's not going to happen to me. I mean, I'm 19, 20 years old. So like, no, that's not going to happen to me. But I share that because it did happen to me. I've got laid off twice. One time I was reduced from full-time to part-time. One time I was laid off for almost 2 full years. So it happened to me twice in about 10 years period. And what's interesting to me is that it didn't surprise me when it came because I already knew someone already told me. But yet the warning didn't really impact me until it happened. And I think this is something I want you to speak to because we see, viral stories of someone turning $5,000 into $100,000 and everybody grabs onto that. But nobody, especially on social media, talks about what happens when you lose that $100,000 or more. And there's stories of that, but that doesn't draw people to investing. That doesn't draw them to your channel and make you an expert that you can continue to sell your social media channel and make money from it. So it won't bring clicks. It won't make you money. So talk about how that in itself is the real danger and how do we overcome that? How do we help them understand, hey, here's the reality of what's actually happening, not just what you're seeing or hearing.
Yeah, well, that's a great point unto itself. I mean, you're right. The headlines tend to be the success stories, and certainly social media is all about success stories, right? So that's why young people are growing up with more depression and anxiety, and even worse, because social media has made the comparison game. It's amplified the comparison game greatly. And again, the stories you hear are the good stories, the wins. There were some horrible things that happened during the pandemic as a lot of people were drawn into investing. There were people that lost a lot of money, didn't make the headlines. There was one tragic story about a young man who took his own life because he was using, I mean, I don't mind saying, I guess it's okay to say he was using the Robinhood platform. Robinhood was not to blame. He was not well educated enough to understand what he was seeing on the screen, and he misinterpreted some information that he thought meant he owed hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was not true. He misinterpreted it, was so distraught over it, he took his own life. So I think this desire for quick results, along with kind of a lack of education, is leading to some bad outcomes. And another big trend in our culture these days financially is automation. So we see when you join a company, you're automatically opted into the retirement plan. You're automatically opted in terms of how much of your paycheck will go into the plan. You're automatically opted into the specific investment that your money will be invested in. Some of this is a good thing. It has increased the number of people who are participating in workplace retirement plans. Some of it is not so good because it's taken the decision making away from the person. It's made it seem like, oh, somebody has my back. Somebody's going to make a good decision for my benefit. And what's happening, the Wall Street Journal did an interesting article recently about a number of people who were opted into their plan, and 5 or 10 years down the road, they looked and they saw, hey, I've got a lot of money in that plan now. I didn't make any decisions about it, but there's a bunch of money there and I want that money. And with 401k plans, it's pretty easy to get that money, to borrow that money. And so
Yeah.
people are shooting themselves in the foot by taking money that's intended for their later years, taking it out earlier and spending that money. So I think the combination of this kind of short-term thinking combined with a lack of education about investing or other financial matters can lead to some really not so great outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah. Despite the dangers of investing and not having the perspective that young people need to have when it comes to investing, I think it's a good thing that they're engaged in it, that they want to do it. I think that's a good thing. I think we need to capitalize on that. So how can we harness that openness, that curiosity, in a way that helps us to disciple them, to move them in a discipleship direction? How would you guide leaders and churches to think and do that?
I think we need to go to them. If we offer a financial workshop, a stewardship workshop for our church, we're probably not going to draw too many middle schoolers or high schoolers or college age young people. But if we go to them, that could be much more effective. So reach out to the person who's leading the college age ministry. If you have one at your church, reach out to the person who's leading the high school or middle school ministry and see if you can get an opportunity to speak to their groups. Go to them. There's a ministry, Young Life, that is very effective in going to young people. They go into the high schools. They go to football games with these students. They're building relationship, drawing people into, encouraging people, pointing people toward Christ. They're a very effective ministry. So I think we can't expect young people to come to us, to our stewardship ministry events. I think we need to go to them. And I think that way you'll find a very receptive audience. When I talk with young people, they're interested in investing. They're not interested in going to their dad's workshop about stewardship. But if you come to them, I think they'd be very receptive.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. The other thing about young people that we know is that they value clarity, authenticity, practical steps to walk that out. And I think the style of teaching that I grew up in, it was lecture style. You did your homework, you just grunted it out, and everything was very manual in nature. And nowadays, just because of the way young people are exposed to knowledge, information, communication, it's a little bit more difficult to reach them with that. I think some of the content that has been developed over the last 15, 20, 30 years just doesn't appeal to younger people. It's a study where you have a book and you have to do homework every day, and it's kind of a self-study, and they're like, what's this? Like, I just want to watch a 5-minute video and understand this concept. Like, I'm not doing this. And I think that's where I really want to challenge some of the content creators out there to really think, are you really connecting with what you're developing today? And if you're not doing it in a way that is attracting them in the same way a Robinhood app does, you probably don't have stand a chance. They're going to deviate to something that's fun, that's engaging. So talk about, how do we teach? What are the teaching methods that a ministry can approach and use that will work and help teens, college students, and young adults understand biblical investing?
Yeah, I do think that's right on. I mean, they're younger people are much more drawn to video content than print content. I mean, people, it's crazy how little reading is actually going on these days. And so
Yeah.
definitely use the video platform to reach people. Podcasts are also popular. But I think also there's a certain message that needs to be conveyed to younger people, and that is that they have an incredibly valuable asset. If they have an asset, they might not have too much money, but they have an asset that is so valuable that many older, wealthier people would give anything to be able to have more
That's
of
right.
what young people have. And of course, that's time. They have time. Time is one of the most critically important ingredients for the power of compounding. And the idea that a little bit of money invested on a regular basis and getting a decent return on that money over time, it multiplies in an exponential way. So show them examples of how, by using their advantage, by using this asset of time, they can really multiply money over time. And it applies not to just investing, it applies to all sorts of areas. John Rockefeller, who many young people probably have never heard of, but one of the wealthiest people from history, he said, I never could have tithed on my first $1 million if I hadn't tithed on my first salary, which was $1.50 a week. And so the
Mm.
point is that when young people are available to us in a teaching moment, to encourage them, to impress upon them the importance and the value of the time that they have in abundance, God willing, that if they will start little, start small right now, over time, God can multiply that in incredible ways, not just with investing, but with just a healthy relationship with money, how that'll be multiplied into a much better relationship with their spouse when they're married down the road, how generosity can be multiplied, not just in the impact that they will have with the money that they give to certain God honoring causes, but how it'll infuse their lives with a greater sense of meaning and purpose and joy. And so, yes, use the tools available like video content. That's right on the mark, but also impress upon them what an incredibly valuable asset and opportunity they have because of their young age.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's kind of as a last question because we could talk about this so much more. There's so much more I'd love to impact, and maybe we'll do it another time. But if you're sitting across from a 16, let's say, college freshman, young adult who wants to invest, is probably already kind of doing something, but is navigating the hype, the influencers, the day trading platforms, maybe following people who promise that, hey, within a very short period of time they can hit it big. What would be your pastoral encouragement to them? What's one biblical principle or a practical step that they can take today?
Yeah, this may not sound like a money verse, but it's a life verse. So, of course, it applies to money. But I would point them to Joshua 24:15, which says, choose for yourselves this day
Mm,
who you will serve.
yeah,
Jesus, of course, said you can't serve both God and money. Money isn't a bad thing. That's an important point to emphasize here. Depending on how we use it, it can be an incredibly good thing. Building wealth isn't a bad thing. Depending on how we go about it and for what purpose, it can be an incredibly good thing. But I love how that verse ends. It says, as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. There are a lot of voices clamoring for all of our attention these days, and especially young people. A lot of voices out there saying some not very helpful, but maybe enticing things. Good starting point for money management and for life is to choose to serve the Lord, choose to follow his countercultural teachings about money and, of course, everything else, and they will be blessed in what they do.
yeah. So the best place to start is there because if you have that right, then everything else that you do will be guided by that principle and that belief. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. Well, Matt, I know that this is a passion for you. I know this is something you invest not only your interest and your time, but it's your life. It's what you want to it's what you want to impact and how you want to impact the next generation, especially. And I know you've written a book about how to help parents to steward and help young families, young children on how to begin. Because I think if we get them a little bit earlier, right, when they're still being formative in our house, before they get to the teen years and start getting really influenced by social media and friends. So talk about that resource, the book Trusted that you wrote, and just anything else that you want to share as far as how people may learn more about what you're doing. Also, touch on Sunline Investing, the organization that you work with that is helping everyone that wants to learn how to really invest in a biblical way.
Yeah, thanks. So, my day job is with Sound Mind Investing, as you mentioned. It's a Christian company that helps people invest. There's a lot of free content on our site. So, I encourage people to go to soundmindinvesting.com to avail yourself of some of that content. My personal blog is mattaboutmoney.com. I write weekly about various financial topics from a biblical perspective, so that would be another great resource. And then you mentioned the book Trusted, preparing our kids for a lifetime of God honoring money management. I really think it's so important to reach our kids and start to teach our kids from a very young age, even beginning at like age 2, kids can start to understand some things about money. If we
Mm.
raise them with biblical perspectives and practices while they're still under our roof, things will work out so much better for them.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Such an important thing to do. That's one of the things that my wife and I are so thankful for, that we're young enough to learn about biblical finance and get on a budget and get together and understand how to manage money God's way early on, so that when our kids were born, we began to teach them when they were like 3 and 5. And it's made a difference in their lives, and will continue to do so. Now, they're going to walk their own journey. They might even make some mistakes. I know ours have, but we have too. But that education and what you've done through Trusted is really to help parents and empower parents to understand, like, you have such a incredible opportunity to set your kids up for success by sowing these principles into their lives before they're inundated by every other influencer and every other worldly perspective out there that's going to skew them and speak to them in a way that will sound attractive. But if they have that foundation, I think it's something that's going to help them weather that storm and really do well long term. So thank you for that work, and thank you for your passion to do that.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
And also thank you just for coming on today and talking about this important topic, help us understand the trends shaping young investors today, but also the discipleship opportunity that the church has today. It's such an incredible thing that we have the opportunity to really help shape the next generation. It is really an opportunity, but also a responsibility. And I know you feel that way. I do too. And I hope that our audience today really benefits from this and it encourages them some way to take steps. So thank you for helping us out today.
Absolutely.
Thank you again for watching or listening to this podcast. We're grateful. Please share it with someone else, another stewardship or church leader. Help them know that this ministry exists, this content exists, and hope that they will benefit as well. We'll see you next time on Stewardship Leader.